These are some highly played Atraxa staples that we think you should just cut from your Atraxa decks.
I'm Mia, and I like using mechanical keyboards.
I'm BZ, and I'm really tall. We're the Nitpicking Nerds. You can support us via cool stuff by using our code
Nerds
in the checkout. When you check out with code
Nerds,
you save 5% on your order. You gotta start doing that, people.
We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
You can use the EU and US description down below in our description box to buy the best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves. Made me say it twice. Okay. Moxfield. There's an ad somewhere in the video. You are free to guess right now where it's going to be. However, you will be wrong, and that's unfortunate for you. And happy birthday to everyone whose birthday is today.
Also, we are wearing some pretty cool shirts. You should go to IntoTheAM, use our link in the description, and get 10% off.
Yes, these are cool shirts, and I promise you'll like the shirts. They're good shirts. Good
shirts.
Shirt. Not that kind of good shirts, but they are amazing. Please use the link. We'll love you.
We're going over the staples for the most played commander in the format, Atraxa, Praetor's Voice. You're going to be spending green, white, blue, and black, so everything but red, for a 4/4 with so many keywords. Flying, Death Touch, Vigilance, and Lifelink. And at the beginning of your end step, you're going to proliferate.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to take this card. We've narrowed down a few of them, and we've gone more general with staples that we see all the time, and you'll see on the top pages of EDH Rec, if you scroll down through the Atraxa decks, you'll see these are in a lot of decks. So we're going to say, hey, I think in almost every instance in the part of Atraxa decks that we're talking about, you can cut these cards, and there's probably some better stuff. For this video, I would highly recommend go checking out the great folks at EDH Rec for more examples, but we're going to talk about the cards we think need to go.
The first section that we're going to be doing are cards for Atraxa that are kind of general. The first one is Sword of Truth and Justice. 3 mana for an artifact that has Equip 2. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has pro white and blue. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, then proliferate. In theory, this is pretty good considering it gives protection and extra stats, and you can use it as a way to get on those counters to begin with. But it's a little bit tough because you're going to need to connect to even get it, and it is 5 mana to even get this engine going.
Yeah, it's a 5 mana investment. How much mana is +1/+1 counter proliferate worth? I would say like 2, maybe 1. I'm not sure. So it doesn't really feel like you're getting much out of this. Play a creature, play the sword, equip the sword, attack with the creature, deal combat damage with the creature, and then have something valuable to proliferate is like so much work. And I think whether you're playing Planeswalkers, +1/+1 counters, filibuster counters, infect, I think there's always a better option than Sword of Truth and Justice. I would really look for almost any card that says proliferate and is an instant or sorcery. I think those are better substitutions.
There's also the fact that you need a creature that can attack, so you might not be able to have this online the moment you play it, even if you have the mana to equip it immediately. So there are a lot of instants and sorceries from March of Machine and All Will Be One, because that set was just so chock full of them with extra effects that you could do for a lot cheaper than 5 mana.
Yeah, and we're in 4 colors, so just the number of options you have is like overwhelming. You can't play all the good proliferate cards, so I think you can just cut Sword of Truth and Justice. Next, we'll go to cards that I've pretty much always disliked in Commander. It's Thrumming Bird and Grateful Apparition. They're basically the same thing. They're 1/1 flyers for 2. Then when they hit, you proliferate. This is actually kind of similar to what I was talking about with the sword. It's just an extra step. There's the potential to proliferate more is there, but you also lose effectiveness as the game goes on when a 1/1 flyer is irrelevant, or you can't get through, or there's only 2 people left and you can't do anything with it. And there's like, oh, maybe you drew it too early and you don't have counters yet, and then you can't proliferate it. I think there's just too much going on for these cards that don't actually put counters on. You need to have counters to put counters. And I'd rather get the ball rolling with Infect, get the ball rolling with a Planeswalker, and then proliferating it guaranteed.
I've definitely got this a little bit too early in my first Mark of Atraxa deck, and it was just rough because late game you wouldn't be able to hit with a 1/1 flyer because everyone would have something way beefier out. And then too early, as you mentioned earlier, there are just no counters. It's easier to get something like, Vraska's Fall to get that poison counter started. Something that'll actually just put 1/1 counters on all of your creatures. These just aren't that good no matter where you draw them, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think in like +1/+1 counter decks, they're especially bad. For those decks, I really want cards that like start with counters, and then maybe they can help get more counters or put counters on my other creatures or proliferate themselves. And these cards just don't. They just feel like wet farts a lot of the time.
Another new card that just came out is 4 Nox. 2 white for an enchantment with Vanishing 4. At the beginning of your free combat main phase, draw a card. And the idea is that you're going to be proliferating these vanishing counters so they don't go away, and so you can keep drawing cards and getting the effect. I don't think it's that great because it's going to get swept up in something like a big enchantment board wipe, like a Farewell or that sort. And then with card draw, I would rather do something that's a little bit more instantaneous, getting you some more cards, especially since we are in 4 colors where you could get the instantaneous card draw in black, or you could get something like a Rhystic Study or Mystic Remora effect in blue.
Would you play Phyrexian Arena in Atraxa?
No.
Especially in a counters type deck?
No.
So why would you play Phyrexian Arena that you need to build around for it to even stay there? It's like a more needy Phyrexian Arena, which I really didn't need in my life. So, like, it seems like it's cool because you can keep putting the counters on and it feels like you're getting away with something, but then you just realize you're not really getting away with anything. It's just like keeping a card that you wouldn't play around longer.
Also, the fact is that if you're not getting any of those proliferate cards, then it's just a worse card draw engine because it will go away. It's like, Mystic Remora, at least you get the chance to let it die when you wanted to. This one is like, oh, if I can't find enough proliferate, this is dying.
I mean, I know you don't lose life, but this can really, we're assuming that's kind of negligible. This really can't be better than Phyrexian Arena. So if you're playing this, I guess you might as well just swap it, even though this is a little bit like more flavorful. If you go for flavor, sure, but we're assuming we're going for power. We're upgrading these decks a little bit.
Another card I'm not really a big fan of is Empowered Auto Generator. 4 mana for an artifact and it enters the battlefield tapped. If you tap it and put a charge counter on it, you can add X mana of any one color where X is the number of charge counters on it. Obviously, you're going to try and proliferate and that sort of thing, but I'm not a giant fan because it comes in tapped, so you can't even use it immediately, which kind of sucks. And then you're going to have to wait, put 1 charge counter on it, and then if you can proliferate immediately, like you're still not getting there when you want it to because you're going to put the charge counter on and it's going to add the X mana, but then you're going to proliferate in response, but you're still only going to have that 1 mana.
Yeah, this card, I feel like it's missing something. Like it needed to enter with a counter on it, or maybe it enters untapped or something, because I just feel like it's so close. But the 4 mana investment to get literally nothing is really a bummer. And it's like, well, I guess you play Atraxa, then you play Empowered Auto Generator, it doesn't do anything. You wait a turn, then you add 1 mana, and then you put a charge counter on it. But then even if you tap it next turn for 2 mana, you haven't gotten your manas back yet. And if you proliferate before then, yeah, you kind of break even, but you still spent mana to proliferate. So it just does not feel like you're getting away with anything like with this card either. I much prefer Everflowing Chalice and
Astral Cornucopia.
And Astral Cornucopia, and maybe even like Replicating Ring or something like that. But a Power Auto Generator just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, we're not big fans of the mana rocks that cost more than 2, but especially at 4 and you can't use it immediately, that's really rough.
Yeah, on other cards, I think that could probably just get out of Atraxa decks. Kodama's Reach and Cultivate. For me in Atraxa 4-color decks, whether I'm like optimizing to the maximum, my deck's $1,000, or the minimum, my deck's like $50 or to $100, I'm really not going to play that many basics. I'm going to play the tapped Tri-lands or the Triomes or the Shocklands or whatever 2-color duels I can get my hand on. So like when I'm playing 4 to 8 basics, I don't love these cards.
Yeah, I've definitely played these in previous marks of Atraxa, and it's pretty bad considering you need all those colors to cast her. So when you get these cards, you're either not running enough basics to grab them when you draw it, especially if you draw it late, or you are running too many basics and you're not able to cast these spells very often considering you don't have the colors necessary.
Yeah, when you have like this demanding mana base, a bunch of gold cards and a 4-color quad pip commander, I don't really want to play 16 basics in my deck. I don't really want to play 12 to 13 basics. So like it's almost like if Kodama's Reach and Cultivate are good and they never whiff for you, I would recommend just cutting them, because now you're playing too many basics, and I think that drawing a hand with 2 forests in it and like 2 other lands, it's kind of a disaster sometimes because it means you can't play Atraxa.
And speaking of lands we wouldn't play the Vivid lands, but this one I'm going to talk about is Vivid Creek, but this applies to all of them. Vivid Creek enters the battlefield tapped with 2 charge counters on it. You could tap it to add blue, or you can remove a charge counter on it and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Obviously you're supposed to proliferate it, but with all these really demanding pips, it might be tough to get those and proliferate in the time you need, considering even though it starts with a charge counter, you might need those to cast other spells to get your engine going, and you might not have those charge counters on them later.
Yeah, this to me just feels another version of Fornox. It's like it's built around a card you would just play anyway. Like I'm going to play Path to Ancestry, of course, over all of these cards because they're already tap lands. So it's not like they're entering untapped and doing some extra value. They enter tapped, so if you just play a tap land that makes 3 colors or all 4 colors, it's just better than these. You don't have to worry about fiddling around with the counters. You don't have to worry about drawing it in a certain awkward position. Like you don't have to worry about, okay, wait, I want to play Vivid Creek because that's the blue one, and then I can use it next turn to make a blue mana, so I won't have to remove a counter. But the turn after that, I'm going to proliferate and then remove a counter. It's like, or I'll just play like Sandstep Citadel or like Opulent Palace and just have all of my, like almost all of my colors. You draw 2 Vivid lands, you're doing NASA scientist math. You draw 2 tri-lands that are tapped or triomes, you're like, oh, I'm good.
I think the fact that it comes in tapped is the biggest drawback to these, considering there are some awesome dual lands, like the ones that were printed in Dominaria United, that you can fetch with your fetch lands, and they also come in tapped, but they could tap for 2 colors, the 3-color ones, obviously. And I think there's just, even though you don't want your mana base to be too slow, there are ones that come in untapped too, like the Pain lands, which are still pretty budget for most of them.
Yeah, I think this is just getting a little too cute. At least I would recommend, and Mia would recommend, just cutting these cards. They might be a little bit more trouble than they're worth. But now a little something for you Planeswalkers players out there. That was general Atraxa advice. This is for advice for people playing Atraxa Planeswalker decks. So keep that in mind for these next few cards.
The first one we're gonna not recommend here is a group of 3 cards. It's Norn's Annex, Ghostly Prison, and Propaganda, for different reasons. First one is Norn's Annex, which says creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless you pay white or Phyrexian mana. We don't really like these effects because it is pretty easy to attack if you're just going to be doing one big swing like a Voltron. I'll definitely pay 2 life or 1 mana for that.
Yes, it's not taxing something they're going to do. It's giving them the options. Like, do you want to attack me? Or do you want to not attack, leave up a blocker, or attack somebody else? There's already that. And then it's, if you're going to attack me, you can pay white mana, or you can pay 2 life and no mana. And it's just like, doesn't even feel like a deterrent to me half the time. When I see this card, my philosophy has been just completely ignore it and pretend like it's not even there. Pay the life if I need to get a big swing in, and I don't think it's really impacted the outcome of too many games. I really would want it to protect my Planeswalkers more if I'm paying at least 3 mana and 4 life for it.
I think 5 mana for Norn's Annex is actually just such a big chunk, too. It's a 5 mana, maybe it'll do nothing for the rest of the game. Maybe it'll get swept up in like someone's Psych Rift. I don't know. If they weren't going to attack me anyways and I have it, it's just a dead draw.
It's weird. Definitely a weird card that I think, even though it says Planeswalker on it, I would not play. And these next 2 cards, Ghostly Prison and Propaganda, they're cards that, it's no secret that I don't really like these cards. But this is kind of separate because these don't say Planeswalkers. So if you play Ghostly Prison and Propaganda and you have 3 Planeswalkers out, opponents can just attack those Planeswalkers without paying any mana. So I'm not really sure why these cards appear in so many Atraxa Planeswalker decks. It's like 11%. I think we could just safely cut these. It's not even protecting the thing we want to do.
Especially since Atraxa herself is just a really good blocker. I mean, you can attack with her, get the 4 life, and she's vigilant, and she has Death Touch. So that's usually enough of a deterrent, in my opinion, to get people to stop swinging at you, especially if they have some really big creature that they spend 10 mana to get out. They're like, ooh, unless it has Indestructible, you're not going to want to swing into someone's Atraxa that they can just recast.
Yeah, it's also worth noting Atraxa buffers your life total a little bit, so I would want these cards a little bit less, I think, when I have 4 Vigilant Flying Lifelink in the command zone all the time. Next is an Oath. It's Oath of Kaya. It's 3 mana enchantment. ETB, it deals 3 to any target and you gain 3 life, I guess. And then whenever an opponent attacks a Planeswalker you control with 1 or more creatures, it deals 2 damage to that player and you gain 2 life. So if, let's say, you have a Garruk and they attack it with 3 creatures, they take 2 damage and you gain 2 life. It's just 1 or more things. I don't think that's a huge deterrent. I don't even have to pay mana or anything. I just kind of take a chunk. If it's important to eliminate your Planeswalker and I can do it, this is never going to deter me from doing that. And this is only, like, on its face, it's 3 mana sorcery speed lightning helix. We can all agree that's not worth playing. So I don't think that next mode gives you anything else.
I mean, we have 40 life and we're going to use it, and it's not even per creature. So if I have a bunch of little 1/1s with like Edgar or something, you have a Planeswalker that I need to kill, I'll happily take the nuke of 2 life and give you 2 life to kill your Planeswalker, especially if it's like a take every creature card from the graveyard, put it onto your field, or take extra turns. It's worth it.
Yeah, if you have 3 Planeswalkers and they attack all of them with 3 creatures each, let's say, then they'll take 6 and you'll gain 6. I just don't think this card is working on the axis that Planeswalker decks want. It doesn't help you ultimate Planeswalkers. It doesn't protect your Planeswalkers except for with a little bit of a take 2 damage. I think we can do a little bit better. Let's go to some Planeswalkers. First one is a Johnny Sleeper Agent. There's so many words on this card. He's completed. He's got 4 loyalty. He's 4 mana, but you can pay Phyrexian, green, white pips. He's +1. Reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card or Planeswalker card, put it into your hand. Otherwise, you can put it on the bottom of your library. -3, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 3 target creatures. They gain vigilance until end of turn. -6, you get an emblem with whenever you cast a creature or Planeswalker spell. Target opponent gets 2 poison counters. Okay, there's so much stuff there. He works with creatures and Planeswalkers. I think the idea is that you're plussing him to hit Planeswalker spells, but I've found this card to his plus. I found it to be really, really bad. Like I rarely get creatures. I rarely get a card out of it. And when you plus your Planeswalker to get nothing except like a Surveil, you feel pretty bad.
I get people might want to do some thematic things with him, like, ooh, he's completed, and he's a Planeswalker, and Atraxa is like a Praetor, and she's
flavorful.
Yeah, it's flavorful, but I think this is trying to do a little bit of everything that Atraxa wants you to do, and because of that, it doesn't do anything particularly well.
That's a pretty good summary of this card. I think, especially in Planeswalker decks, I think, how am I winning? Well, I'm cheating out my Planeswalkers, and I'm doubling the counters on them. I'm ultimating them really ahead of schedule. When you ultimate a Johnny, he doesn't even like help you. You're just like, okay, I got an emblem. I just went doubling season a Johnny. That's already like 2 cards and a turn and a half of effort. I get nothing. I get an emblem now that I have to cast 1, 2, 3, 4, 15 more things to distribute the 30 poison I'm going to need to win. This is a Planeswalker deck, so you're not playing other cards with poison. It's like the slowest possible emblem win condition I've ever seen.
And your -3 giving counters is okay, I guess, especially if you have Proliferate. And they gain Vigilance only until end of turn, though? I mean, that's a big chunk of his health because he comes in at 4 loyalty.
You seem like you really don't want to do that. The only thing that does that seems cool to me is like it makes Atraxa a 7 power, so then she's a 3-hit kill, but we're playing Planeswalkers, right?
Yeah, we're not looking for that. We're trying to kill people with our cool ultimates, not by commander damage.
Yeah, so like lackluster plus and just, I think, a really bad ultimate unless you're playing poison, but we just established you're not. You're playing Planeswalkers, so I think you can get him out of there. Who's the next Planeswalker?
The next one is Vraska the Unseen. She comes in at 5 loyalty. Her +1 is until your next turn. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to her, destroy it. -3, destroy target non-land permanent. And -7, create 3 black 1/1 assassins with tokens that say whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. I think people get baited by that ultimate because it's so cool. It's like, heh, one hit, you can lose the game if I let you hit with it. But like, it's not like it has trample. It's not like it has death touch. It's just like, oh, I have a 1/1. Cool. Block. Awesome.
Yeah, this to me feels like you got to jump through extra hoops because, again, the +1 I think is pretty bad. It doesn't do a whole lot. 5 mana to destroy an non-land permanent means you're probably not ultimating her, so that's also a pretty big feels bad. Although you can use it in like a, the worst case scenario. You're like, okay, well, Lisa does something, but still, that's pretty rough. And then the ultimate is like, make 3 dudes. My deck is not focused on evasive creature maneuvers to cheat combat damage in. So then I have to untap with them, but there's so many things that could go wrong.
I think that the only thing that's particularly good is the -3, but because we're playing every color but red, let us say again that I would just have any sort of destroy spell. I would rather have my Assassin's Trophy. I'd rather have a Generous Gift, Beast Within. Anything, I think, is better than just tossing out a Planeswalker that can be destroyed at any point when I can just have an instant in my hand.
Yeah, I mean, if I want removal on a Planeswalker, I'm thinking Teferi, Master of Time. I'm thinking Oko. I'm thinking even like Teferi, Time Raveler bounces something and replaces himself. Like Liliana, Dreadhorde General. These are all cards I'm going to first. They've got such more relevant pluses, minuses, and ultimates than Vraska.
But when you're looking for Planeswalkers, there's a couple that just aren't that good. One of them being Deploy the Gatewatch. You look at the top 7 of your library, you can put up to 2 Planeswalkers from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest onto the bottom of your library in a random order. Now, in theory, this sounds really good because you're going to be cheating out mana, but this spell is like 6 mana to begin with, so it's very costly. And you can only look at the top 7. It's not even like a real tutor, so if you whiff, you just go, oh, spent 6 mana for nothing for a Planeswalker that costs 3 perhaps? I don't know. You could whiff and it can feel really bad really quickly.
The first thing this card makes me think of is how many Planeswalkers do I actually want in my Planeswalker deck? I have felt that once I go past 15, the deck starts to be pretty non-functional. This card needs you to have 28 because you want to have 2 out of every 7 cards be a Planeswalker so that you can have at least okay chances of hitting 2 in your top 7. Which still leaves the possibility that this card only hits 1 Planeswalker or 0, both of which I think are borderline disasters when you paid 6 mana to get up front. And I think when you're playing 15, this card isn't even in the conversation because it'll whiff so much.
And then you're also thinking about how much are these Planeswalkers costing? Because if you get 1 Planeswalker off of it and that feels good, I guess, but that Planeswalker costs 4 mana. Then you go, oh, do I need more expensive Planeswalkers in here to do that? But then your average mana cost just goes up, and then your deck is less efficient. And I just think that it's a bad rate overall, no matter how you slice it.
Maybe if you can stack your deck, but it's hard to stack your deck that deep, right? Like maybe with some kind of like soothsaying, but now we're getting into really wonky cards. I don't know how to ensure that 2 of my next 7 cards are Planeswalkers. I'd rather just use Call of the Gatewatch, which just tutors for 1, and Ignite the Beacon is 5 mana to just tutor for 1. Just put them in my hand. It's all right.
You're not going to put like top in here just for this, because you're going to want to have more synergy than that. So I just wouldn't play this overall.
Yeah, land we can cut for these decks. Interplanar Beacon, it says when you cast a Planeswalker spell, you gain 1 life, and it makes a colorless mana, but you can pay 1 and tap it to make 2 mana of different colors, but only for Planeswalker spells. So you're basically mana fixed. It's like a signet for Planeswalkers. But as I said, I really don't think you're playing more than 20 Planeswalkers in your deck. In fact, I'd heavily advise against it. So for all the other 45 spells in your deck, this doesn't color fix, and you're 4 colors. And I think I really want to use colorless lands more sparingly, or not at all in an Atraxa deck.
Yeah, I've had trouble using colorless lands in Atraxa. There's a couple I've had to take out utility ones, like Field of the Dead.
Sadly.
Sorry. Reliquary Tower was kind of rough in it too, because I needed so many pips to get Atraxa out and that sort of thing, that it was just really hard in the end to kind of have the justification for them when I could be putting in some other colored land that, even though it might come in tapped or I might need to like cost a couple of life to use, it was still better overall because I was getting to my game plan faster.
Yeah, I think of like the high demand colorless lands for Atraxa, and the first one that comes to mind is Karn's Bastion. That is like huge value, huge upside for even for Planeswalker decks, where you untap, you proliferate maybe with a spell, and you're like, well, this Planeswalker's 1 away. Karn's Bastion, activate, thank God, win the game or go off. And Interplanar Beacon, you're getting some mana fixing that you would have had anyway because this should be a colored land. So if it was a colored land, you'd still get mana fixing. And you gain a couple life. I just don't think I want a couple life that badly.
The life to me is negligible, especially since your commander does have lifelink for 4. That's like more than you're gonna get with this overall, especially if you hit a couple times or you have a way to give it a couple counters.
Yeah, just pretend that Atraxa is Interplanar Beacon and it says every turn gain 4 life. That would feel way better. Next, we're going to go to one of the most popular ways to build Atraxa. It's Mia's favorite, Infect. These are cards we would recommend cutting from your Infect decks. First one might be a surprise. It's Phyrexian Swarmlord. This is a 6 mana 4/4 with Infect. And on your upkeep, you get X Infect 1/1s, where X is the number of poison counters your opponents have. And that seems really cool, but for me, at least, as someone who's built an Infect deck, and I know for Mia too, we'll get to her in a second, but I have cut the 6s and the 5 drops just right out of those decks. You have so many 1s and 2s and ways to just proliferate scrappy little burn spells, basically, that I don't really want to have 6 drops in my hand almost ever. It's weird. I've just cut all the expensive Infect cards for 1s and 2s and 3s and evasive stuff and like cheap auras, cheap ways to make them blockable. More proliferate, more straight up giving away poison thanks to All Will Be One, that I have not felt Swarmlord to be anything other than slowing me down.
It was great before All Will Be One, but it's one of those cards where if you're ahead in the game, then it's amazing, but you don't need it if you're ahead. And if you're behind and you don't have that many poison counters on it, then it's not really going to matter. You might get one little dude and that's fine, but it's not evasive or anything. It's not going to really get through. People could just kill it with like a 2/2. I don't know. It's one of those where when I've had it and I've played it and it's been explosive, people have gone, oh my God, I've made 10, 15 little dudes, but I've also had it sit dead in my hand because I haven't been able to get poison counters on people, and it would make 2, 3 maybe.
Yeah, so if your opponents are at 1 or 0 poison, or even 2, you get a couple, but you'd feel like, geez, I really need to get going here. Like, it's turn 6. I need to make something happen. And Phyrexian Swarmlord is one of the cards that gums up your opening hand and makes it so that you can't make things happen on the first 4 or 5 turns, which I think are really important for Infect decks. And then when you're winning, you're crushing them, and they have 8 poison, or one person has 9 poison. Wouldn't I rather just have a way to proliferate and just kill them? I feel like that would kill and win the game more often than playing a Swarmlord and going, next turn I'm going to get 70 tokens. Just proliferate.
There are a lot of cards that were good before All Will Be One because poison wasn't that good before All Will Be One.
It was all relative, yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of just like the fight. It was like, okay, these are the best of the worst. But now they're not that good considering we have so many little 1 and 2 drop creatures that can just give poison evasively, death touch and flying and, all of the ways that just people just can't block immediately.
I mean, one option, another thing you could swap 1 for 1, I think. You take Phyrexian Swarmlord out and you put in Moxfield.com. What would you rather play? Would you rather play Phyrexian Swarmlord in your Atraxa decks, or have the ability to upload your deck onto Moxfield.com?
I would rather have it uploaded on Moxfield.com, and you can even see mine on Moxfield.com. It's on our account.
Yeah, so like, why though? Why would you choose that? Is Phyrexian Swarmlord, I thought it was great. Why would you want to play Moxfield instead?
Because Moxfield lets me pick all of the printings I want, which mine is updated to every single current printing that I have in Atraxa. It'll tell me the total. It'll tell me all of the prices of the other ones that we could do. And if you scroll down a little bit, it'll also show you recommendations for other Atraxa decks. If you want to build it in a way that's not poison, maybe you want it 1/1 counters, maybe you want it in a Planeswalker deck, you can scroll down or you can search for it and it will bring you to other Atraxa decks.
Yeah, Phyrexian Swarmlord's not even a website. It's just bad. What's
Not
the next
clickable.
card? Yeah.
It's Fuel for the Cause. It is a 2 blue spell that says counter target spell, then proliferate. And I took it out because that is expensive to hold up for a counter spell. The proliferate does not matter that much. I would rather just be running a little cheap dinky spell that's like target creature gets -1/-1, then proliferate, because I'd rather just get a counter spell and then something that proliferates than just one big beefy counter spell that I will usually not hold up the mana for.
Yeah, it's harder to hold up. I think we do want some of those bad proliferate spells because they're like permanent burn spells. They're really, really good. The more crap like that we chain, the faster we win the game. Even 1 mana -1/-1 proliferate. Like, I haven't tried that card out, but I'm thinking maybe it's just good. Maybe you just need that kind of thing. Fuel for the Cause is like you have to wait and you hope to counter a relevant spell, because countering anything for the sake of countering it, then you're just paying 4 mana for a counter, and that's not really that efficient. I just feel like it lacks in too many areas for me to play it just because it says proliferate.
It was a lot of mana to keep up. That was my biggest issue. I'd rather be playing something with a lot of card draw and also some cheap proliferate spells and cheap counter spells than to have an all-in-one package but have to keep up all that mana.
Yeah, 4 is a lot. 3 I already think is a lot to hold up, and 4 I think it just gets exponentially harder. Let's go to Geth's Summons. This is a weird card. It's 2 black for a sorcery. Return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then it's corrupted. For each opponent who has 3 poison, you take one of their creatures and put it on the battlefield under your control. I got a couple issues with this card. Number one, how interested is Infect in reanimating its own creatures for 4 mana? That's not that efficient. 1 and 2 is where you're feeling like, whoa, I got a good deal. Or you pay 5 and you get 2 creatures or something, or you reanimate all of them. Then I'm feeling pretty sweet. 4 mana for 1, I don't feel that great. It isn't good early because you might not have creatures and your opponents might not be corrupted. And then late in the game, what am I supposed to do with my opponent's creatures? I just want to play cheesy burn spells and sneak through, crawling cores. I don't need their Inferno Titan.
Corrupted is one of those mechanics where it was really good in 1v1 when we were playing draft and such, because you only had one opponent to focus on. But since there's 3, it's not that good. It's not that good of a rate, considering if you want reanimation spells, we have better for cheaper. If you want things to give poison, we have better for cheaper.
Well, this just doesn't give poison.
Yeah, so it just expects you to have it, and I'd rather have a way to give poison to my opponents first.
Yeah, I have a one-track mind when I'm playing poison. I don't want to go, well, and since while I've got you here, while you're poisoned, let me take you on this tour of other cards. Like, I'm just going to poison you some more, actually. What's the next one?
The next one is Corrupted Conscience. 5 mana enchantment, you control enchanted creature, and it has Infect. I've had this be good in a couple instances. Like, I took a Gutter Snipe once and then just started chaining.
That was comical.
Yeah, sorceries at instance, and it killed people really fast. But other than that, if you don't have a way to just do damage like that immediately, it's a 5 mana, steal your biggest thing. Oh, it's still susceptible to removal and stuff, so if it has summoning sickness or something, it just sits there, and you'll have to wait and hope that it survives.
Even if the creature you're stealing has haste, that probably means it attacked last turn. I don't know why I'm playing creature with like a big dragon. 6/6 flying haste. Play it, attack. Now you can steal it, but it's tapped, so it can't block and it can't attack, obviously. I feel like this card is not a reliable way to get poison counters, and when you do somehow manage to steal something, untap with it, and then hit for a bunch of Infect, it's slow. It's 5 mana, and it has a big target on it. Everyone knows it's coming. There's no tricking anybody with this. A card I've liked that feels more tricky and like gotcha is Putrefax, where it's just a 5 mana, 5/3 trample, Infect, haste. It dies at the end step, but we just treat it like a fireball. And most of the time I draw that card, I end up killing somebody. Corrupted Conscience, I've never really seen kill anybody.
Yeah, I've used it once or twice to kill people, but it was just like, like a big dragon or something, and they let it go and tried to use it as a blocker, or in the way that I said, there was direct damage. But that's really lucky. You have to get lucky for those, and 5 mana in a slot in your deck is a big price to pay to get lucky, you know?
Yeah, sorry to the editors, but the cards that you really, really, really want in Atraxa decks and Infect decks in general, you want Crawling Chorus, you want Bilious Skull Dweller, you want Glistener Elf and Virulent Sliver. Yeah, it's basically the same thing as Glistener Elf. And then you want Skrelv, and you want all of these little dummy dorks. I think if you don't have all those cards, just cut Corrupted Conscience for another one of those. You'll be happy.
Moving on to corrupted things, though, it's Bring the Ended and Corrupting Resolve. Better in draft than they are here. You counter a target spell unless they pay 2, or counter if straight up if they're corrupted, or counter target spell if its controller is poisoned. And these don't give poison, so I think that they're not that great. I'd rather just have a straight up counter target spell.
Yeah, I don't know why we're messing around when we have access to better cards like Arcane Denial, which won't put us down a card. Counterspell even, just to make sure it's 100% counter with no like restrictions. If they don't give poison, just play whatever the best version of the card is, I think, for power. For flavor, totally fair. But I don't know how you could come to ask me upgrade a flavor deck. I can tell you to upgrade a deck for power.
I wouldn't even play these in a budget deck. I would be playing like Negate instead.
Yeah, Disdainful Stroke. I think there's no reason to really go to these. They just ask a little too much when I can play cards that are basically strictly better, and these don't give poison at all. Same is true for Phyrexian Atlas. This is a 3-mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. So it's Manalith, which we tend not to play ever. And the bonus is that when it becomes tapped, each opponent who's corrupted loses a life. But what do we do with that? We're not making them lose almost any life. So it's not going to amount to anything.
When it comes to poison, I don't care how much life you're at. I'm trying to count to 10 here. I've killed people who've had 1,000 life. And so I don't care if you're losing 1 life. I'd rather get that mana quicker and use it immediately to get those poison counters on you.
Yeah, we're actually already in green, so we don't want to play mana rocks that don't give poison. So like the Staff of Completion is a pseudo mana rock that can give poison. I love it. The Glistening Sphere, it's a mana rock that proliferates. I love it. But like Dimir Signet, Phyrexian Atlas, I'm just not playing those cards. I'm playing Nature's Lore, and if it doesn't give poison, I'm just going to play the best version of it.
Yeah, I'd say if you're really hurting for colors, obviously the Arcane Signet and that sort, but 3-mana rocks are rough to begin with, especially in green, and then the life we just don't care about.
Next, we're going to move on to the +1/+1 counters Atraxa decks. And the first one, I saved the clickbaitiest for first. It's doubling season. Reminder, like I just said, we are talking about +1/+1 counters. I don't think doubling season is a very effective card mana-wise. If you're only going to be doubling counters, when we have things like Hardened Scales, a lot of the times when counters are put on, it's 1 at a time. So Hardened Scales is double. If you just keep putting 1 over and over, it's the same thing. And we have Branching Evolution, which is 3 mana. It's got the same text as Doubling Season. That also doubles counters, but it's 3 mana. There's just so many cards like this. Pier, Imaginative Rascal, Ozolith, a Shattered Spire, that are like half the mana, do the same thing, and maybe offer a little bit more.
5 mana is a lot to pay for Doubling Season, and also Hardened Scales just got reprinted. Even though Doubling Season just did, it's like still $40, down from $90, which is a chunk, and Hardened Scales is $5, so it's better for budget, and it's better for your deck to just not be playing this card.
Yeah, if in Planeswalkers, I think Doubling Season's great. It's like a combo card. You play it first, you set up a big turn when you spend 10 mana, and then you can win the game with a Planeswalker Ultimate. But that's never going to happen with counters where you're going to get that much, but that these other cards can't also give you, that they come down earlier, and they probably are honestly less of Lightning Rods than this card.
Yeah.
Because when I see it, I think Planeswalkers no matter what.
Yeah, with Doubling Season, I would rather just be playing like a Vorinclex,
That too, Vorinclex is cool, but I mean, Doubling Season is just a little bit expensive. I could also see Vorinclex honestly being too expensive also. Just stick to the 2 and the 3 mana ones. How about Basri Solidarity? What's that one?
It is 1 in white for a sorcery that says put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control.
That's it?
That's it. Especially at sorcery speed, it would maybe be a little bit better if it was like a gotcha, like you're gonna swing at me with everything. Well, gotcha, double the power now. But you could see this coming, and also you don't have a better way to put +1/+1 counters on your creatures.
I feel like we do. A card I love playing in these counters decks is Felidar Retreat. It's an enchantment. It's a little bit more pricey, but then you start playing lands, and it's not a one-time effect. Every single turn you get put a +1/+1 counter on the creatures if you want to. But if you don't have creatures, it's like, here, let me spot you a few. Here's some creatures. And then if you start playing fetch lands or you ramp extra, you also get Vigilance. So just like, I love Felidar Retreat. This didn't wasn't supposed to be a love letter to that card, but I just think Basri's Solidarity has such a low ceiling.
Yeah, I love Feldar Retreat for these texts too, because you have 4 colors. You gotta be needing to find those. So even if you can't get the Modern Horizons 2 fetch lands, because those are a little bit expensive or whatever, there are those other ones that come in tapped that you can still fetch with, and you can get those double landfall triggers.
Or don't have any fetch lands and still play it, and I still think it's probably a better card. Biophagus is weird. It's a 2-mana dork that taps for a mana of color, but if you spend a creature to cast it, then you get a counter on the creature. There's weirdly like a lot of competition for 2-mana dorks that care about +1/+1 counter stuff. We already have Gyre Sage. We already have the one with Adapt, Incubation Druid, and we already have Devoted Druid. So like, how many 2-drop creatures that synergize with +1/+1 counters am I supposed to play? I'd rather play all 3 of the other ones because they can all tap for multiple mana, and some of them even have ways to mess around with counters. This just like adds a counter. I'm really not into this.
Yeah, it seems like just a worse reprint that was included in 40k. It's cool because it's flavorful for that, but it's not flavorful for this, and you could be doing better in terms of mechanics, so I wouldn't include it.
Yeah, sometimes even Tangled Florahedron I like better than this guy. Sorry, Biophagus. Who's next?
Next is Rolesk, Apex Hybrid for 2 green and a blue for 4/5 Flample. When it enters the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control. I hate the fact that you can't split these up for one. That's a little bit rough. And if you don't have another creature, it's just a 4/5 Flampler.
And when it dies, you proliferate, then you proliferate again. So if I'm trying to sacrifice this, it's a weird sorcery that like puts 2 counters and then proliferates. So I'm getting 4 counters, but I spend 5 mana. So I don't really want that. I want to have the dies be more of like a cherry on top. And then like you said, I'm getting a 5 mana Flampler that it's like 6 power, 5 toughness, 6 power, 7 toughness spread out a little bit. This just isn't. I feel like you can get a bigger burst, like Colonian Hydra is what I think of. Even the new worm from Dominaria United, which isn't that new anymore. The Devourer of Green something, where you just put a counter on all your whole team whenever you cast anything. I like that a lot better than this. I just think Rolesk is like, it feels like a D- type card. I'm just not going to be scared of it ever.
Yeah, I think another thing you mentioned is if you want to sacrifice it. But if you're doing +1/+1 counters, you're not going to have a lot of sack outlets in this. In a 4-color deck, I'm not running like Phyrexian Tower,
Yeah, exactly.
Because
no high market.
Yeah, there's not going to be those synergies. And double black isn't going to be particularly great when most of my deck is green and blue.
Rolesk is cool if you start cloning him, because then the clones die and you're probably cloning him for cheap and then you get all the proliferates. But that feels not really +1/+1 countery. That feels more like a Rolesk deck. The next card I have not seen almost ever, but it is still among the top instants in these Atraxa counters decks. It's Solidarity of Heroes, 2 mana, double the number of counters on a creature you control, but you can target more creatures if you pay 1 and a green extra. So you can pay 2 green and double the counters on 2 creatures you control. But that already like implies that you're gonna have a lot of counters on these creatures, because doubling 1 counter is really bad. Doubling 2 feels like I'm starting to get there, but then I want to be like doubling 3. But now I have to ask, do these creatures have evasion? Do they have ways to take counters off, put counters on? This card is dead a lot of the time. I got a lot of problems with this card.
Yeah, I was thinking about the fact that I'm like, ooh, this is like kind of dead a lot. Because if you don't have counters to begin with, it's not going to give any to begin with. So at this point, I think I would just rather have the other one we were talking about, where it was just like put a +1/+1 counter on your entire team, because I don't have to pay 2 mana for each creature, and it actually gets the ball rolling. I guess this is good if maybe you want like a Voltron deck, but that's not the deck we're going for here, so I think it's not that great.
Right, yeah, this does not get the ball rolling. It literally says, if you are behind or you're struggling to get your footing or you're developing your board, I do literally nothing. There's no defensive use for this card. It's all... You have to be steamrolling them exactly for this card to be good.
It's a gotcha, and as someone who loves gotchas, I still wouldn't play this.
What about the next gotcha, which is Silk Guard, X and green for an instant, put a counter on X creatures you control, or as equipment, and modify creatures you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Obviously, that includes all the creatures you just put counters on.
That is just... I don't love it because you have to keep up a lot of mana.
Maybe, right? Like maybe. If you put counters on your creatures already, then it's like a 1 mana... all your creatures gain hexproof. But how do you feel about 1 mana, all your creatures gain hexproof?
I'm not that fond of it, because hexproof for my entire team, it's usually not targeted at my entire team. It's usually 1 creature that I'm looking for. And so I'd rather just play something that is like, just blinking out like Teferi's Protection or something if I want to protect my permanents. And I'd rather just give things like Indestructible. And I think Heroic Intervention, which is a card we're not high on, is still better than this.
I think that blows this out of the water, honestly. And I'm not too big on playing it. I don't know if I'd played in a 4-color deck. I probably wouldn't. But yeah, if you don't have the counters, this is a really rough rate. If you do have the counters, I feel like I'd almost rather just have like Ranger's Guile or even like Tamiyo's Safekeeping or something, because it feels like it's about the same, where I get a counter and I protect one creature, because there's very rarely like a Fire Covenant targeting all your things. And you're like, well, guess what? But even then, that's when we play Heroic Intervention. Or the other card that's in counters decks is 2 and a green. It's Inspiring Call. You put your counters creatures gain indestructible, and then you draw a card for each one. Like, that card also blows this out of the water. I highly recommend that one.
Yeah, if you're not doing a Fire Covenant board wipe, this doesn't protect against the rest of them. So I just would not be a fan.
So if we got the juices flowing and you want to build a new deck, take a look at our 7 most unstoppable commanders, because some of them are very hard to keep off the board. I think you want to know about it.
Yeah, and tip for the day, don't blindly trust EDH Rec if you don't know what you're building.